I was thinking I would start by explaining how I came to work in this way and why I work this way. And I was looking back and I realized I work very intuitively and a lot from personal experience and life experience, because I realized that working with things that I know, such as personal experience, that I feel my work is most genuine. And I definitely feel that when you work with something personal, it does access and open up to the universal, because then you're making work for you as opposed to other people. So even if it falls flat, it still has been helpful because you're working through your own things. So this particular work came from a recent transition I went through. About a year and a half ago, I became a homeowner. And it definitely brought to light my Peter Pan complex, which has always been there. But becoming a homeowner really made me realize that I can't run from adulthood. And suddenly my shift, it was exciting and scary, but all of a sudden I realized I had these new focuses that really became a major part of my life, like crown molding and laminate flooring. And it was funny because although that isn't something I would think, yeah, Saturday night I'm going to go put in my laminate floor, I was. And I started realizing that through all these life experiences and doing all these things and becoming an adult, I just started to really see everything in my life as art. And I don't know if that was more of a coping mechanism or just because that was my focus. And working towards becoming an artist, I really see those, the lines as being slippery. So I started spending a whole lot of time in my house, and I was focused on all these objects that I needed, like kitchen tables and collecting and creating this home. Like nesting became such a major part of my life. And I realized that it just was, I couldn't get away from this moving away from childhood. So I started covering these objects as a way of showing care and kind of focusing on this nesting and also trying to turn them into plush objects. So it was a way of creating kind of like a childhood toy. And I started creating a collection, and all of a sudden they started becoming like building blocks as I was creating these different formations, and just focusing that here is this object that's taken directly from my life, and that really made me see that the life and art and how they collide, and how they become one. So this work is primarily about that. And as I was working in my space, doing all this stitching, I definitely needed a little bit of a reprieve. So I started doing drawings and sketches and taking pictures of my surroundings. And I wanted to bring in another aspect that also combined the childhood view. And so I started looking at, I used to work with coloring books, and I wanted to make these linear drawings that focused on the reality, rather than, when I was a child, I always had like Barbie doll coloring books, and it really made me feel like I was contributing to the glamour of life by like adding color to her clothes. And I realized if I took something like this that's not necessarily glamorous, but portraying it in a way that you would see it in these books. So originally I was making a coloring book, but then I started looking at these images and I wanted to see them separate. And I realized a large part of my life was playing with Shrinky Dinks. So I brought out old materials from my childhood and I started drawing them out on Shrinky Dinks and shrinking them down, and I just loved how they became intimate. So you have these surroundings, my home, even made more intimate and small, and people can actually see like slices into my life and different changes and how you wouldn't know what the changes are, but I do. And I felt that this was a good conversation because you have the line, and then this kind of becomes the lack of line. So you have like a positive and a negative, or the form, and then the 2D. So this really, it felt comfortable going back and forth when I was tired of stitching. I could go back to here and just work back and forth between the two. But I think that the main thing was just focusing with this idea of having a little bit too much reality in my life. And this is a way of taking a step back and working through it and seeing things in new perspectives. So that's where I'm at. And I'm open for any questions.